Hello, hello. Welcome back for those that have done other lessons. Welcome. My name is Kristen Thompson. I'm part of the ADVizE team. If this is your first lesson that you're joining in for. So here we're gonna collect and play with some data. Ha ha ha, yay, so exciting. Just as a reminder, ADVizE is a data visualization experience for pre-service teachers. So here let's think about how do we kind of collect, create, and reflect on a data visualization for data that we collect ourselves. As a reminder, as part of the project, we had students collect data themselves. We had students access data that other folks had collected through online portals, or we had students do both. So a variety of different implementations, but there needs to be data. We need to have data to play with. So let's get some data to play with. So first step, get set up with data collection. So you need to pick a data protocol that you want to follow, or collect some data based on a data protocol that you already have baked into your curriculum. Some of our faculty that have implemented previously, they do seed dispersal protocols and all sorts of different things. So you pick your protocol. We did not state this. We did not mandate this when we were going through our project because everybody's different in terms of what their interests are and what their focuses are for their teacher prep programs. But there needs to be a protocol that we follow. So collect the data following that protocol. If you're having trouble figuring out what protocol you want to follow, check out the list of data protocols that we provide in the assets in this lesson. You can jump in, you can track those down, follow them, figure out if there's one that you want to use. So collect data following your selected protocol for your testable question. Now, I want to pause for a second here and think about this. This is a big piece. Like, we don't collect data just to collect data. Let me rephrase that. In our K-12 classrooms, we should not help our students think about like, oh, we're just collecting data to collect data. There's a data for a purpose. Like, what are we trying to investigate using those data? What are we trying to learn using those data? Data are a means to an end. They're a way for us to investigate a question, learn something about a phenomenon, understand a system better, understand the world better, different things like that. In our sciences, natural and social sciences, technology, engineering, and math, there's a means to the end. Like, what are we trying to do? Learn, grow, expand, enhance, understand better. So that's where our testable question comes in. Testable questions, something we can actually investigate or explore with data. Non-testable question, why is the sun yellow? Well, we can Google that. Or like, why are Fruit Loops the colors that they are? We can Google that. Non-testable questions. What causes us to see the sun as yellow? Ooh, now we're getting into a place where we can use some data to help us think about light refraction and reflection and different things like that. Like all this, so there's a difference between like what we can just look up versus what we can test and investigate with data. So we need a testable question. So you need a question, something generally that you want to look at data to answer or investigate. And you need a protocol. There needs to be a standard way to collect those data. Now, the other piece that I want to share, and that we found sort of articulating this from the beginning is really important as the faculty were implementing across the country, the data set needs to be robust enough. Now, what is enough? Well, it doesn't have to be ginormous. Ideally, more than 320 would be great in terms of observations. We know that's not always possible. But even more than the number of cases, we also need to think about what kind of variables or attributes are in that data set. And ideally, there's going to be at least one that is numerical. Numbers, continuous numbers, make up that variable. Think height, or amount of precipitation, or age, right? These are continuous number variables. And at least one that is categorical, where we categorize different things into different categories. So color of M&Ms, or the size of coffee cups or the size of pumpkins or different things like that. So ideally, the protocol that you're following, the data that you're collecting, will have at least one numerical and one categorical variable in it. Now, really ideally, it has at least 3 variables in it, but I understand different protocols call for different things. Why? We need a robust enough set of data that we can actually do something with and look at and explore and try to make sense of as it relates to our testable question. Very rarely do we have a question that we can only answer with 2 variables. Very rarely do we have a question that we can answer with only 2 categorical variables. Even our really littles can be looking at numerical data. And so go off, find some data. For this activity, you can use a data set that you've collected in a previous semester if that's easier, but we need some data. So go find some data, go collect some data. And by find, I mean, but make sure it's data that you or your students have collected in a previous semester. Don't go into an online data portal. We're getting there next. So go collect some data and then come back. Probably pause the video while you're going to collect the data. Okay, hopefully you did, and you've come back and you've got some data. So before we keep going, just sort of pause and think about, like, what are some things you're excited about from those data? What are some questions that are coming up as you were collecting those data and pulling together your data set? What are some hesitations that you have about the data as you collected it, or now that you've collected it as it relates to your testable question? Just sort of do a little bit of a gut check of excitements, questions, hesitations. Okay, when you're done, keep going forward. Pause the video to do that. When you're done, come back, keep moving forward in the video. Okay, so we've collected our data. We've thought a little bit about sort of that gut check of like, how am I feeling about these data? Now it's time to make a visualization. Graph, chart, plot, map, whatever noun you want to use. Let's visualize those data as it relates to your testable question. Now, in our project, we really leaned into analog formats of creating these initial graphs. It helps our pre-service teachers be more sort of loose and open on how they visualize and what they think about visualization. Sometimes when we get into technology land, we can be like, oh, it needs to be perfect and the scales need to be identical and the lines need to be straight and different things like that. And that's actually not important at all in our initial explorations and visualizations of our data. So we leaned heavily into analog formats of paper, pens, sticky notes, beads, manipulatives, different things like that. But you absolutely can use some graphing technology. But what I want you to do is make a graph from your data in your data set that relates to your testable question, and just explore. It doesn't need to be perfect. We're not trying to answer a question. We're not trying to like tell a story from the data. We're just trying to get a sense of like what's going on in our data and how we can visualize it in some different ways. This is our initial graph. This is a key core component. Okay, so you can pause the video as you go make your graph and then come back, or your visualization. Great. So you've made a graph. Now it's time again to sort of do this like gut check, sort of reflect a bit on what you made. What does your data visualization show? Like what are you actually trying to show from your visualization? Recognizing that it's an initial exploratory data visualization. It's not winning any awards. It can be messy. The messier, the better, within reason. What can you say about your testable question from your data visualization? Did you get excited about something and go off in a different direction? That's awesome, by the way. But thinking back to, we stepped into our data set with a question we were interested in exploring or investigating. So how does this particular initial exploratory data visualization help you explore, refine, identify components related to that testable question? And then what is a story you could tell from your data? Maybe it's not the story you eventually want to tell, but what's a story that you could tell right now from your visualization? Okay, just think about that a little bit. We don't often pause. We just sort of get really into just do when we're making our visualizations. And so we've embedded these reflection prompts along the way to help build that metacognition for our pre-service teachers to execute and then reflect, and then execute and reflect, and different pieces like that to really kind of break it down, unpack it, and think about the different pieces. Okay, when you're ready, let's move on. So with our pre-service teachers, hard to do this if you're doing the asynchronous course by yourself, but I wanted to talk through it. And with our pre-service teachers, the next step is a gallery tour, 1.0 of those graphs, that initial data exploration. Okay, so what we ask the pre-service teachers to do is to go around, review each other's visualizations, and provide feedback on what's a question that they have, or what's the question the graph is trying to explore. So can I identify from your visualization, in essence, what your testable question was, what it was you were trying to investigate and explore from the data. Also provide feedback on what are questions that they have, that I have, about your graph or about their classmates' graphs. So those are different, right? Green is I'm trying to identify what question you wanted to explore. Blue is I am identifying what questions I have by looking at your visualization. And then orange are just other things, other comments of, I really like the use of green here, or this tile of points was really helpful, or I really liked how you brought these two different variables together to help me sort of see their overlap, or things like that. Ideally, we encouraged our pre-service teachers to provide their feedback in the form of a question, because I don't know what you were thinking about as you were building out this initial visualization. So when I say things like, the green doesn't work, that's not actually really helpful because I don't know why you selected green. Whereas if I say a question of a like, oh, I'm curious why you chose green for this, or I'm curious why you chose green for this because it actually makes me think of that. Then we're forming a question that the data visualizer, the person whose visualization it is, can take back and think and reflect on. So why the gallery tour with an initial visualization? Well, a couple different things. What we're trying to do is we're trying to norm set some realities of working with data. One, rarely ever do you work in a vacuum, even though often in our K-12 system, we have students work by themselves to build their data visualizations to their completion and then hand it to the teacher. And so we're trying to break that habit, that pattern, or that behavior pattern of I do my graph, I do it by myself, I do it to its completion, and then I am done. I won and done with my graph. Authentically, when we work with data, we are creating our visualizations, we're getting feedback, we're seeing how it lands for people, what resonates, we're getting feedback on what we can do better. So we're trying to kind of create that as the norm of the reality of working with data and exploring data and visualizing it. Another component of why we put the gallery tour in this part of the activity sequences or resources, why we really stress this is an initial data exploration visualization, is because this creates opportunities for the pre-service teachers to see two things from one another. One, if you're using the same data protocol across the entire course, which many but not all of our faculty did, then it creates a great opportunity for students, pre-service teachers, to see, oh, we can use different visualization types with the same data set. More on this later. This is a key component for our students to realize about exploratory data. Many of our pre-service teachers we found had always been told what graph type to make, and there was always one right graph type or visualization type to make from the data. And that's just not at all how it works when we're working with data. Secondly, we're normalizing that not everybody is an expert at the beginning, and that we have a community of peers that we can lean on and grow from and learn from. And so by putting out these initial exploration visualizations, we can see and create opportunities for discussion of, oh, I struggled with that too. Oh, this is how I solved that problem. Creating that they are using each other as resources and not always looking to you as the teacher, as their faculty member, to have all the answers. This is important for them as themselves as learners, the pre-service teachers, and also for them to think about creating that space in their future classrooms for their students, of looking to each other, their future students to look to each other as resources and not always back at the teacher as the resource, the holder of all the knowledge. So we had a gallery tour and then do a bit of a debrief to think about. And this is where some of those pieces that I was just talking about come out of like, what was something that surprised you as you were reviewing each other's visualizations? This is where we get a lot of like, oh, other people were struggling with what I was struggling with, or oh, a lot of us used bar charts, different kinds of things. And then another question prompt that we've used a lot, that we used that resonated, that helped pre-service teachers do this reflection was, what was something that made you feel less stressed about making graphs visualizations as you reviewed each other's graphs? Again, sort of normalizing that we're not all experts and that's okay. And not only is that okay, that's the reality. That is where we should be. We are learning and building on our skills. And then this is the key piece that had one of the biggest impacts on pre-service teachers and that we heard a lot about from our faculty is we asked pre-service teachers to go back and revise their graphs based on the feedback they received from their peers. So they were to review all the different feedback, the blue, green, and orange feedback that they'd received through the gallery tour. And they needed to make some decisions on what they wanted to incorporate, how they wanted to shift their visualization based on that feedback, not create an entirely new visualization for an entirely different question, but rather, how did they go back and revise and iterate that initial exploration data visualization based on the feedback? And they need to add a figure caption that is their testable question of what they were trying to explore in the data. So previously we didn't ask for that because we were asking them to get feedback of what others thought it was. And then in this step, we're like, nope, state it, put a stake in the ground for like, what is the testable question that you are trying to explore? And this revise your graph piece is very similar. It's modeled off of the writing workshop of we do initial draft writing, and then we get peer feedback, and then we revise and we edit our writing. We teach students how to build that skill into their writing practice. This is creating an opportunity to normalize and norm set that in our data practices as well. Okay, so as we are having our students collect their own data, there's a couple different things going on. So we were collecting the data following a protocol, and that is, varied or interesting, leads to more robust data exploration. So which data we have, often when we collect data, we're interested, we're invested in those data. If we can collect data following a protocol that has a variety of different types of variables and robust enough sample size or number of cases within it, then we can actually do data exploration and we can think about it from a variety of different ways. We can visualize it in different ways. This is what is necessary to help build these data exploration skills. There are many opportunities along the way in data collection to deepen students' data exploration and visualization skills and approaches and processes by having them provide each other feedback along the way, or by having them do some reflection and turning and talking to each other as they're doing those reflection points, sort of creating moments to pause and think, not just check, execute, can help sort of kind of lift the veil of, what are we actually doing? Which is helpful not only for our pre-service teachers in their own data skills, we found, but also critical for them thinking about, and how might I unpack this to help my future students start to build these data skills as well and get comfortable in this process of working with data in this way. And finally, creating and iterating our visualizations or our graphing is a key part of exploratory data analysis and working with data. We need to get off of one and done graphing and create space and time and opportunities to dig in and think about, create, and then iterate as we are doing that exploration. That is what sets us up down the road for better analysis and interpretation of our data. So we've walked through some various components of how we had students work with data that they themselves had collected. And we did a bunch of them. And then we talked through other ways, the next set of resources to have your students do as you're exploring. I tried to provide some context along the way of why does it have all these different components, sort of what was the method or the method behind the madness, or whatever that expression is, of why we built it out this way and what really had impact from what we heard from the faculty that have implemented and the pre-service teachers that have gone through it. I hope you had fun collecting, playing, visualizing, revising. Did you revise your visualization? Good to walk the talk, or walk the walk as well as talk the talk. Until next lesson, I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you soon. Bye.